not only just know the information, but they will have to apply it and also demonstrate how they know it and why they know it in various ways. Another thing that is referenced in with the Common Core is the fact that the Common Core not only is nationally benchmarked in terms of what possibly Illinois or Florida or Massachusetts is doing, it's been internationally benchmarked with some of the top nations throughout the world. And so what we're going to do now is, regardless of where you live, what your zip code is, what your area code is, the Common Core is going to provide a much stronger and rigorous type of standards so that we do compete with the nation and in the long run the international company that we keep. Part of too what we're going to have to do is you're going to see a stronger influence in terms of the writing component. Now writing for several of us have been, when you think of writing, it's primarily been within the English language arts, and English teachers have been the primary responsible person for teaching that. You're going to find that throughout K-12 that writing now is a stronger, it's influenced strongly in terms of the assessments and then also how we teach it. So in terms of the dumbing down, I would use that word very cautiously when trying to explain the Common Core. It's actually absolutely more rigorous. Anything, Cindy?
Thanks, Jody. Statement 3, the new standards were developed by private interest groups in Washington, D.C. Either of you.
I guess I'll start with that one, Jody, and then you can add to it if you have anything in your notes. What I know to be true that happened were, this was led by the state superintendents and the national governors. So CCSSO is the Council of Chief State School Officers, and NGA is the National Governors Association. And they were together for a conference, as they do yearly, and they were meeting and talking about what's happening in the different states. And they had talked about it for a couple of years prior to that, and they found out that all of the states were going through a process of building new standards, aligning assessments to that. And they said, you know what, doesn't it make sense that we pool our efforts and we all work together to develop this? And so they held an initial meeting in Chicago, and I was lucky enough to be in the room that day, along with 7 others from Idaho. Some states, several states, only had one representative there, maybe their state school chief or their state superintendent. But Idaho had 7 individuals there, and I want to tell you that Idaho was the only state that had any educators in the room. And I was very proud of the fact that we did take teachers there, because we felt it was so important to listen to them through this process, and because it was really going to affect them as well. So that's how it got started. And there was enough interest in the room that day in Chicago that after everyone gathered and left, then this effort was continued by those 2 organizations, like I said. So it was good to watch the process. The authors I've met with several times, and many drafts were given out. They were made public. We sent them to districts, and everybody had an opportunity to provide feedback. They had thousands of comments, and many of them were taken into consideration as they went through the process. So, you know, I felt really good about that process at that time.
So in your experience, that occurred not, from what you saw, it was fairly open in what you were involved in.
Absolutely, it was very open, and it was all, you know, it was educators, it was PTA groups, national PTA, it was businesses, it was higher education, parents, teachers, school administrators. Everyone was involved in that process of reading the drafts, you know, providing input. There were groups like associations of state supervisors of mathematics, English language arts state groups, and that were all giving feedback and providing help in that effort.
Every group probably had an acronym that had it.
I know they did. I won't go into that.
Okay, I'll make a last statement that I'd like either of you guys to respond to. And this is one that I've heard a lot of concern about. The implementation of these standards will take curriculum decisions away from local school boards and will place control in the hands of the Idaho State Department of Education. I've heard that concern. Would either of you like to respond?
I'll start on that one. So in regards of the local control, First of all, the Common Core standards were adopted by the State Board of Education. Now, there still is a process in place that is absolutely governed by everybody's local school board. What that entails then is, at least speaking for Caldwell, we have policies in place in terms of how we adopt curriculum. Now, the confusion, I think, may be coming in the fact that we're trying to use the word standard and curriculum all in the same sentence. So standards are the guidelines, are the alignment of the expectations. Now, how you teach that and the resources and materials that you put to that is at that local control, is at that district control. And so within Caldwell, the process would be we absolutely are going to review all of the materials. Now, the state does go through the process of reviewing the materials for us first and put it on a list in terms of which ones are good, which ones are great, and which ones they would recommend with some reservation. That list is produced and distributed out to the district, so we do have that. They use the manpower, they use their resources to do that research for us. From that, then, it absolutely comes down to the teacher and the patron level in terms of what type of curriculum we then adopt to support the implementation of the standards. You have anything? That's good.
Okay, well, I've made enough statements. So I want to give you guys, I want to provide some framework, a couple questions, and hopefully you guys can take that and teach all of us a little bit about how this arose. Cindy, you talked about Chicago and the event there, about the numerous public forums within the state. Can you give us a larger overview of where these standards came from? We mentioned international standards, national standards, things that make some of us that like local control a little nervous. But where do these standards come from? What's the historical framework behind them, and the purpose from what you know that these core standards were created and adopted?
Okay, knowing I was going to get a question like that, I thought I'd better take you through this timeline so that you all understand where we've been over the past few years and where we're going in the near future. So if you take a look at the slide, this gives us the Idaho timeline of moving to these standards. So originally, we've had, this isn't the first time we've had standards in education, right? We started with standards in the late 80s, early 90s, and that's what I talked about earlier, how every state adopts their own, they develop their own with their educators. So the next step then was, okay, getting an accountability measure with the ISAT, and that was developed in 2001. So in 2009, this is when the development of these Common Core standards started. And then we went through that process, like I explained just a few minutes ago, of the drafts and the public comment. And then they were formally adopted in Idaho in 2010. So that brings us up, to today, in the last couple of years. What have we been doing in our districts to get ready for that? And we knew they were adopted, they were going to be fully implemented this coming fall, and we knew they were big enough, it was a big enough change. Like Scott said earlier, it's the biggest fundamental change we've seen in recent history in education. And so it's not something like a regular state change where just a few verbs might change. It's a bigger adoption. So we gave ourselves 3 years to start this implementation, and we've been doing professional development in our districts. We've been aligning our current materials. As Jody will show you in a minute, what used to be taught in 6th grade is no longer always taught in 6th grade. So we've had to do some groundwork to prepare and get ready for these. So we've been in that process, and every district in the state is in a different spot there. So next year is our full implementation, and when we say full implementation, that basically just means that Idaho standards will no longer be referenced. We will be teaching Common Core fully, as fully as we can, but understanding that this is going to take some time. It may take 3 to 5 years for it to fully be implemented, and that's exactly the process that we went through years ago in the 1980s and 90s, late 80s and early 90s, when our original standards were adopted. It took 5 to 10 years to get everybody on board and up and ready. So that's kind of the timeline, and then our new assessment, we'll have the ISAT in place this year and next year, and then in the spring of 2015 is when our new assessment will be in place. So Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Jody, because Jody had an opportunity today to get some new information. So these are new slides that were put in there, and she's the expert on these.
So what this shows is this afternoon, actually all day today, we had an opportunity to sit with some folks explaining the new legislation that was all passed here in the past months. And so what this slide is showing is the state has done quite a little bit of work in terms of taking the Idaho standards of what we're transitioning out of into the Common Core, which we're about to transition into here coming up in this fall. And so what this slide represents is information from the state as they did this. Now it's called a crosswalk. And so what they did is has taken all of the standards as we know them now and walked them over or tried to make an alignment or some type of correlation to where will those standards then be taught, where should they be taught, or have they been taught. And so this particular slide shows the fact that ELA here stands for English Language Arts, that as they did the crosswalk of a K-12 alignment of old standards to the new Common Core standards, they found that just approximately 22% of the current standards don't align or weakly align into where we are teaching them right now. And so within this, it's fairly strong that what we're currently teaching is well in line, with minus about 22%. Where the concern, I guess, or the sense of urgency comes in, is this is how our math standards are currently aligned. Now, if you look over onto the far, it would be my right, your left, is 22%. Now, this is quite concerning, because if we continue down the path of the Idaho standards the way they're currently aligned, what this is saying is basically 46% of our current standards are not aligned in terms of preparation for where we need to get to for those college and career readiness. The next one here has to represent, and I apologize for this, but this got quite busy, but I think if you particularly pay attention to, and I'm going to stand up and walk because I'm not a sitter anymore, but if you look over here to grade 6, this is what absolutely struck everybody by awe today, is if you look up there, what this is saying is that blue bar, that 70%, what this is saying is 70% of the standards we're currently teaching 6th grade, when you map that over to the Common Core, should have been taught earlier. So what you're going to find over the course of this transition as we get ready and prepare in 3 to 5 years as we implement the Common Core, you're going to see what was taught in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in math is now the expectation is going to be down in the elementaries. What we know as Algebra 1 and geometry at the high school level, the expectation now is that's going to be taught in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which then will open the doors for higher level math sooner at 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. The other concern with the Common Core, as we understand it, is going to come from the fact that if you're familiar with the ISAT test, it currently tests up through the 10th grade. Now, with the Common Core and the new test that's coming on, it's called the Smarter Balance Consortium Assessment, SBAC for short. We like to do acronyms here. But the Smarter Balance test, that's going to go all the way up through the 11th grade. So what this is going to allow us to do is better prepare folks not only in just English Language Arts, but in the math, so that we set a stronger foundation for it, but then also start preparing them for those higher level math skills sooner and be able to provide that information by the junior year, therefore preparing them for post-secondary and career.
Okay, so what are standards? Like Jody was talking about before, standards and curriculum are two different things for us educators. Standards are basically educational, it's a framework, it's a guideline, it's a roadmap to help teachers ensure that their students have the skills and the knowledge they need to be successful. We don't just sit around and at a table in collaboration and say, well, what do we want to teach next week? We are given these state-adopted standards, and we have a year to teach them, and we very carefully map them out with timelines and calendars to make sure that we get through everything. And then we find the curriculum materials to align to that. So that's what standards are. They provide clear goals for student learning. So what are the goals of the Common Core standards? You know, in the past we've had this mile-wide, inch-deep program, and that's what we've been teaching. And we haven't been able to stop and take the time and teach it deeply because we have so much we have to introduce, and that's a disservice to our students. So one of the major goals of these standards were to make them clearer, higher, and fewer, so that teachers are really able to focus at their grade level and on fewer standards, but teach them deeper. And that we feel that's exactly what this document does. Today too few of our students go on after high school to earn degrees or certificates. And of those, 41% of those, and I don't know if you know this in the room, that's a pretty big number. 41% of those students that are graduating from high school enter remedial classes when they get to colleges, universities, and they just aren't ready. And so this is an opportunity for us as educators to do a better job at getting our students better prepared. And then, Idaho students do lag behind other countries, not just Idaho, other states as well. Our students lag behind other countries in these international assessments, such as the NAEP. So content areas, you might ask, okay, what's involved with the Common Core standards, all right? There are lots of things that we teach. They really focus on two major areas. English language arts, which include the key features of the reading, writing, the speaking and listening, and then the language skills. So those 4 core areas underneath English language arts. And then mathematics. And mathematics really gets at a lot of, our current Idaho standards are pretty skill-based, and they're skill-driven for math. And this is a nice balance between the skills students need to have, plus the processes that they use to solve those problems. And that's what a big change is in these mathematical standards. Like Jody showed you that chart, where half of them, or not half, but 46%, pretty close, we're not highly aligned, and that's why, because our current standards don't really focus on the process that students use. So that's one of the big changes. So you might think, hey, what's going on in your districts? What are the next steps? So I'm going to have Jody talk about that.
Can I ask, no, that's fine, but you mentioned something with English language arts and math. So what do we do about social studies? What do we do about science? How does Common Core apply to those things, or does it apply to those things?
I've got one thought on that, and then I'll see if there's anything else. But, and that's a really good question, because this is affecting our social studies teachers, our history teachers, our science teachers. And what's happening is there's a lot more writing in our curriculum, or in our standards than we've seen in the past. There's argumentative writing, there's informational writing. Our text complexity has increased, and so we're doing more, not just the literary text, but the informational text, and so we're having that balance, and so they're not only getting it in their reading class periods or the classroom, but they're also getting it across the curriculum in those different subject areas. So those teachers are having to learn and change and grow along with.
So although there's not an Idaho core standards for science,
right?
Science, biology, chemistry, whatever. The idea is that by raising proficiency in English and math, you can help raise proficiency along the entire range of things that we expect our kids to know in high school and middle school and
exactly, and we do have state standards for science, we have state standards for social studies, and with this Common Core effort in English language arts and math, the science group has said, hey, don't leave us out, we want to come too. And so they've developed their own set of common standards called Next Generation Standards. And those have been developed in science. We've seen the drafts, we've looked at them, we've provided feedback just, I think it was in February that we did that, and those are getting ready to come out. I don't know the timeline on that adoption, and I don't know if Jody has seen that, but we're constantly getting emails and updates on that. So good question.
And then too, just to add in a little bit more, the speaking and listening are going to be key components in terms of when we start preparing for that career, for the employers. And we'll get into that here a little bit more. But one thing too, to realize is that it's a problem solving and it's critical thinking. And so that just doesn't happen within math or English language arts. This is going to be skills that are taught throughout K-12 to introduce and to promote and to also absolutely embed the ability to problem solve and take it to that next level, that higher level thinking skills. Yeah, let's talk about next steps. Okay, so here, we're going to talk about next steps. So here are the next steps. You might be thinking, what are the districts doing right now? And so we wanted to throw this in to show that we are actively, aggressively, proactively getting ready so that teachers, buildings, schools, everybody is just on track with where we're going and what we need to be doing. So the first thing that has happened, and Cynthia spoke to this a little bit, in terms of professional development training, we're doing quite a little bit of that. And in preparing not just for the Common Core, but just effective, better teaching, higher quality teaching, in terms of we no longer have to teach a mile wide, right? We can narrow in and focus in and take it to that next level. Now, as we take it to that next level, we need to make sure that the tools are there and that reciprocity is approached in terms of the expectation is there, then that we've provided the tools, the information, the training to get them there. The next part has to do with communication and publications. There is so much information now. You have in your presence right now in your hands information on the backside that has parent where you can go out on the web. Achieve the Core is amazing in terms of puts a lot of technical talk into user-friendly dialogue that you can understand, that I can understand. The other publications that I'd like to know is PTA, the Parent Teacher Association, the national, has a lot of information out there for you. And then again, Cindy and I are always available for questions. Part of two, what the districts have been doing is looking at the current resources that we have in-house, looking at how to draft lesson plans, modify those, and incorporate that in some type of a mapping or a curricular timeline. So we do this as we go through the process of implementing it. The other big thing is building capacity. What you're going to find is it's new, and anything, go back into your own personal worlds, anything that's new sometimes can be fearful, kind of scared of what's going to happen. And so building that capacity and making sure that, one, the support is there, and the support is there both regionally through networking with Cindy and I going back and forth, and including Melvin conversations and Meridian in conversations, but getting into and Homedale in the conversations, but getting that conversation to where we're not this isolated island amongst just Caldwell or just Valley View. We're going to brainstorm off with each other. And then the partnerships that we develop are very, very crucial in this implementation. The partnerships we're talking about here is with the College of Idaho in terms of what teachers in the pre-service, and what we call pre-service is when we begin to train future teachers into coming into the profession. And so the partnership with College of Idaho, with Boise State University, with the University of Idaho, Go Vandals, all of that has to do with the partnership that we develop so that they are fully aware of our practices, we're aware of their practices, and so on and so forth. And together that then is going to put a fairly solid foundation in terms of how we implement the Idaho Core, how we implement it successfully.
So, given the complexity of implementation, and this started in 2009, 2010, and my guess is that all the school districts in the state are much further, some are further along this continuum and others are lagging behind. You're in our town. How far, Cindy, is Valley View, would you say, on a scale of 0 to 10?
On a 0 to 10, I would say, and I know there are some of you out there that work in our district, they might have a different number, but I would say we're probably at a 6 or a 7. We have been working for a couple of years. We've been building units of study. We took 2 of them in math last year, 2 this year. Our teachers worked hard over the summer to come in and build calendars aligned to our current reading program, look at the informational text that they have. We've worked really hard. We've had some parent nights this fall. We have committees at our district level that are looking at this and implementing it. So I have to tell you, though, I will lay awake at night, and I just had a conversation with Dr. Charlton yesterday about my nervousness and being ready for this fall. I mean, it's a big undertaking, and I can tell you that we haven't sat still. We've been moving, but we have a long way to go. And so we have a 3-year plan that we're developing to move forward and keep moving. The work will never be done.
And I think that's the important fact, is it's not a point in time that we're reaching for. It's an ongoing draft, revise, draft, revise, draft, revise. So in terms of Caldwell, we are too working very hard in terms of preparing and understanding and doing the information in terms of what do we already have in place, what do we need to modify, What do we need to revise? What do we need to go back and revise? What do we need to plan for? And so it's kind of, we know the target, and that's very beneficial. But now it's an approach on how do we get there, and how do we get K-12, both ELA and math, or English language arts and math, arriving similar at a similar time. So
I'll take that as a 6 or a 7 too.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're talking standards, and what we've got is the difference between standards and curriculum. You know, I think the danger is I know I can make some, and I've probably done that tonight. But if we've got these new standards, regardless of the history from where they came from, the reasoning behind it, we've got to find a way to measure our progress towards these standards, right? So what's the assessment piece? What does the assessment piece look like? And that's I mean, we've heard teaching to the test for so long, and so now we're switching the test. So how does the new assessment mechanism affect how we're doing things? Not saying that we ever did teach to the test, but now our assessment tools have to change with the standards. So what's that going to look like?
So just to address the teaching to the test, we don't teach to the test, we teach to the standards, which is 100% aligned to the test. So in fact, I guess you might say we're teaching to the test, but we're teaching to the standards. And so what this looks like is, it is very different, and this is a big part of it. You've heard the changes that are taking place with the standards, so obviously the assessment is going to be different. And like Jody said earlier, SBAC, or the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, is the group that we have aligned with. There are 2 in the nation that are building a new assessment. The other one is PARC. And I think it's 26 of the states have aligned with SBAC. I'm going to call it SBAC just because my mouth is getting dry. And so Idaho is one of those. We happen to be a governing state, so we have people on the board of SBAC that are helping to make these decisions. Some of us we're on committees, we're on groups that are giving feedback, and here are some of the differences. So right now our ISAT test is total multiple choice. Another word for that is called selected response, where the kids know there's one right answer, and if they're good at taking tests, sometimes they can come up with a really advanced score, and it doesn't mean that they know the content. So with this new test that's coming out, there are several different problem types that your kids are going to see, and I think this is a huge change. They are going to have some selected response items. They'll also have constructed response items, which means they're going to have to construct their response and type it into a text box. And both of our districts right now are involved in a spring pilot of this, and I was over at East Canyon the other day. They're doing 3rd and 4th grade English language arts that they're piloting, and you should see the little 3rd graders type on the keyboard their answers. And there are also technology enhanced items where kids kind of have to click and drag. They have to click on something and then a line draws down. So those are new things for kids that they're not so used to. And our high school was doing it last week with our 10th graders, and they were wondering about that. It's just new for them, and we'll get them ready for that. We'll create those opportunities for them, but it's new. And then they'll also have performance tasks where they actually work together in a group in their classroom and do some work prior to the test, building knowledge, gathering data, and then they'll go into the testing environment and answer questions based on their work that they've done prior to that. This test includes practice items throughout. There are formative assessment items, and that happens to be a subcommittee that I'm on. So we've been looking at those. And then at the end of the year, there'll be a summative test, just like our ISAT now. It'll be held over the last 12 weeks of the school year. So we'll be looking at those schedules. But this is going to look different. Right now, our ISAT scores are very high in our districts because we are used to that. We have fully implemented the Idaho standards. We have materials that are highly aligned. Our teachers have professional development. They know those standards. They're familiar with them. But it's going to take a while to get our new test scores back up to that 90th percentile. And I just want to explain that right now so that when those tests do come out, you understand that. It's not that we're not doing our jobs. Our teachers work so very, very, very hard every single day, and so do our kids, and so do you guys as parents supporting them. But when the measure changes and when different, we'll maybe anticipate a dip there. So I just wanted to let you know that. But then the information that we get back, the big word there is balanced assessment. We're going to get so much better data, it'll be more authentic, and it'll be more useful to us when we're planning instruction.
So just to dovetail onto that, what districts are doing currently then, as Cindy spoke, we need to move away from always offering multiple choice or selective response test. So what you're going to find is we start to put in some of our formative and some of our end of course assessments. It's going to be more of that balanced assessment, a combination of going into the multitasking of question types rather than just providing A, B, C, D. One thing too that you're going to find is I'd like to direct you out to the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium website. They do have samples, it's on your sheet, Cindy's telling me. They do have sample questions for the particular grade level and for the particular subtopic or substrand that they're testing for that. It's quite an eye-opener. And it's quite an eye-opener in terms of we've never been assessed like this before. One of the questions, and Caldwell is also piloting this particular test for the state right now, but in November we had an opportunity to pilot the 11th grade test at the Caldwell High School. And that was quite an experience for us in terms of all of the informational text that the student had to read, how they had to synthesize it, produce an answer. One of the biggest aha moments that I saw is usually there's always one right answer. And what we found on a portion of the math test is all of the answers they provided were correct. And the statement was, which one is a better way to solve? So not only do you have to know how to solve for it, but now you have to do some reasoning and some higher level application to figure out now which one was the better way to solve this particular problem. So we are starting to embed these questions into daily practice, into our formative assessments as Cindy spoke, and then also into the end of course assessments that we're drafting as we speak.
So I've got a question that
All right.
you can talk, you can get the specifics. I want to get, we're getting pretty wonky, formative assessment and all this stuff. No, that's fine. But we've gone through with the recent debate over the Luna laws and everything, and one of our big gaps that we know in the state is we have a remarkably low level of kids. We graduate kids at a really high level. In Caldwell, it's about 90, or right around 90%. Valley View, I think it's like at 96%. But the number of those kids that go on to college or go on for some after-school certification, whether it's welding certification, some sort of training that allows them to be better citizens moving on. How does this change in standards and the assessment of our progress towards those new standards help us as a state address that gap? You know, you hear it, the employment gap, right? There's more jobs that demand more skills than there are people that have those skills available. So how does this change? I mean, when the rubber hits the road, that's what we're talking about here. How does this change impact that from a business standpoint in a positive fashion?
I'll attempt to answer that. You know, it's been a goal of both of our districts to really increase the rigor for our students so that they can be more prepared for college and the workforce, and that's absolutely a main goal of these Common Core standards. It's not just about sitting in a row in a classroom and being quiet and following directions and raising your hand when you have a question. It's about problem solving. It's about critical thinking. It's about working together to solve problems. And you know, in my past work, I worked very closely with Micron and the Micron Foundation, and they talked about how much money they spend, you know, $1 million a year to train their professionals and to do some of the remediation that's necessary. And so they gave input on these standards to make sure that their employees were, you know, they're helping us and saying, here's what we need our employees to do. They need to be able to talk, they need to be able to present, they need to be able to think critically, and they need to be able to work together. So yesterday I was in the second grade classroom, and these little second graders were working on a math assignment, and they were working together, and I love seeing that. I love hearing the students talk, and it's, you know, quite different at the second grade level than it is at the high school level, and those little second graders are learning. And the one little, I don't know, I shouldn't tell you the story, but it's kind of funny. The one little boy said, oh, so tell me what you're working on. He said, don't ask me, she's in charge. And it was just cute because they're learning how to do that. And if we don't ever give them that opportunity, you know, I can't imagine if my superintendent came in and, we were working and he said, well, tell me what you're working on. And I say to Jody, well, don't ask me, she's in charge. We have to teach those skills along with it. So I guess that might be an example of how these standards will help prepare kids. Do you have anything on that?
The other, and I neglected to talk about one of the partnerships that we've developed too, and this is prior to the Common Core, but what both of our districts are involved with is the Treasure Valley Education Partnership. And what that is the South Idaho district, which encompasses primarily all of the Treasure Valley. School districts are in partnership with businesses, and they call it the Treasure Valley Educational Partnership. And our superintendents are here today in support, which is just wonderful. Hello, gentlemen. But they meet on a regular basis, and their primary goal is to bring business partners to the table so that educators, so that districts know, one, what businesses need, what their expectations are when folks graduate from our doors and we send them out to the world, and are they prepared, regardless if they do go on to a 4-year or 2-year certificate, on to just right into the career. But that is a strong partnership that both districts have formed and will continue to build as we implement through this.
Can I show you a sample of it?
How wonky is it?
It's not wonky.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to show you an example of a test item. In the past, the question on the test might be 17 times 12, and there are 4 multiple choice options, and kids know it's one of them. So they might be able to, take 2 out of the equation and go, well, it's probably this one or this one. I guess it's going to be C, because that's what my teacher told me to say, right? So this is an actual item coming from Smarter Balance. That's an example. So the question is, which model or models below could represent the solution to this problem? Click the letter next to all that apply. So they're not even asking what the correct answer is. They're saying, how are you solving the problem? And so some of you might have kids that are coming home with math homework, and you say, I can't even help my kids with math anymore. They're not doing it the way I did it. And I understand that. I, as an educator, as a teacher, had to learn some of these things too. But kids have such great ideas about how to solve problems. We have to take their ideas seriously, and we as teachers become the facilitators of their knowledge as we move forward. So now that you have it figured out, the right answers are marked there in red, B and D. Those are models that work to solve that problem correctly. And then another one is this item from Smarter Balance, where it says, look at each expression. Is it equivalent to 36x? Is that divided minus? I can't even see it. Divided by 24y. Select yes or no for the expressions. So now they have to solve each one of those expressions and then answer yes or no. Whoops. I thought we had that one. Oh, I guess we didn't. But anyway, I believe the answers are yes for A and C. So there are different ways to solve that problem and different models that kids can use. So those are just some of the changes.
They still have to write the right answer.
They still have to get the right answer, absolutely. That's very important. But it's not, it used to be, just show me the right answer, and, teachers would correct it, hand it back, and say you didn't get it right, do it again, and see how you do, and give them some help. But now it's really about, oh, I see you got the right answer. Tell me how you solved that problem. So.
Okay. We're running on about close to an hour now. So if you guys have questions, can we pass them down to the end? Because I want to make sure we get to some questions, and I don't want to be here for too much longer. I'm sure none of you do. Ladies, if you have anything you want to kind of wrap up with before we take questions, now would be a good time. And then I'll see what questions we have, and we'll pick some and read them, and we'll answer them that way.
I guess what I want to say is thank you so much for being here. It shows that you are supporting your child. You want to learn more about what these changes are. We have to work together as a team to make this successful. Parents, teachers, students, we have to work hard, and I just really appreciate the turnout that we had tonight. So thank you.
And I would ditto that. It's quite impressive to see the commitment that you have and understand and fully appreciate that we have that same commitment to make sure that we're prepared and we're ready for the conference. One thing is we're collecting the cards. This is information in terms of a parent toolkit. The State Department of Education is starting to collect a toolkit And what's going to happen with that is once they collect it, at least for Caldwell, we're going to take that and Caldize that, that's a word. I tend to make things up if it isn't. Well, we're going to make it specific to the Caldwell School District. Absolutely, but at the end of the day, we're here for you. And so I know Cindy's very open to it, and I'm very open. If you have a question, our information we're going to put up there. We have cards. If you'd like to take a business card of ours, we are absolutely open, and we would like to have conversations with you about what we can be doing different, what we can be doing better to assist all folks through the transition into the Common Core.
I've got one question for you, since I'm trying to sort through these. I've got a couple kids in Valley View District. What should be my takeaway from this in terms of, how can I help them, being my kids, work through this change? Are there things I can do? You name a parent toolkit, contact you at home. When they come back and they say, this is completely new, I'm lost, how can we help them through that process?
I think that's a great question, and I think that some of those resources are in front of you tonight, but the other thing I would encourage you to do is be involved in your child's education by coming to things like this, attending parent conferences, have regular communication with your child's teacher. Email is a great way to be in contact, and it's very easy to answer an email. I would ask your child to, sit down with them and say, hey, bring out your homework. Let me see what you did today in math, or let me see what essay you're working on, or what book are you reading. Let's read it together. And then ask them some of those critical questions and say, not just what did you get for the answer, but you know what? I'm not sure what you did there. Can you explain to me how you got that answer? And you might understand it, and you might not, but you can at least help them through that process. The other thing is teachers are going to know that this is, a phase of implementation. And if your child is struggling, send that email to school to the teacher. Go meet with the teacher, and I think that's going to be your best resource.
And two things that I would focus on is the informational text. Now there's going to be a balance between literature and informational text. But the more informational text folks can be in front of and read, I think that's going to be a plus. And the other thing is just write, constantly writing. I think with the use of an iPad and an iPod and texting, we've gotten away from the actual writing of thoughts. And so I would encourage as much writing as you can to help with the process. Kids in the room probably don't want to hear that. Oh, the other thing is, and this was an aha moment, sorry Anita, I'm using you guys again, but the other thing was, so we watched 11th graders walk through the process of informational text. So they would read it, they would synthesize it, they would write, and the very last question after 3 questions was, okay, now what's the other side of the story? You've now argued for this side, now argue for the other side. So have that conversation and not that we need to form stronger opinions, but ask them what their opinion is. And then ask them, so how could you defend the other opinion? How could you defend the other side of that? Just that problem-solving, critical thinking skills.
Okay, I've got several that seem to repeat themselves. Those first one, got 3 of them that ask this same question. How important is preschool and kindergarten in meeting the new standards?
I think I'm going to take that because I just spent the afternoon at our Treasure Valley Educational Partnership on school readiness and what that looks like and what it's going to take. And we're going to start meeting monthly now on that. And, I know Idaho is a state that doesn't highly maybe support all of those preschools and those kinds of things. But what happens is, however students are prepared for school, whether it be in the home, whether it be in a certified preschool or certified daycare, it's important to get kids ready for school. And in our region, in the state, it's about 50% of our students, I guess if you look at the Idaho Reading Indicator, in this statewide, about 50% of the students are coming to kindergarten prepared. And I know that the Common Core standards are expecting a lot. So So I think it's important to get your kids to read, to get them to write, to ask them questions about math, have them do puzzles, have them play with Legos, have them get out in the backyard and dig in the dirt and bring in what they found and have them, draw a picture of it. You can kind of scribe what they say about it. It's important to get them ready, obviously, at any time, but this is a critical time, and there's an effort in our region, in our Treasure Valley, to really help support families and providers to get them ready. So, good question.
Here's one that, and you two are more involved in implementation, so you may not know the answer to this, but I'm interested in this. We talk about this being a state-sponsored program, and the states have driven it, and Idaho's driven it. But there's certain federal monies out there, right? Title I. Are Title I monies or some of the federal monies tied to this Common Core standards or benchmarks in these Common Core standards? The old saying, follow the money. It's an important concern from my perspective, and I don't know if you guys know the answer to that.
I can give you a partial answer. I'm typically superintendent of follow this is a partial answer. Some time ago, the federal education department made conditional for the receipt of federal funds that school districts put in place college and career standards. But that was it. You guys decide, they're saying to the state, you decide what they are, but we want those in place. Well, no one in Caldwell is going to argue that we want our kids to graduate with college and career readiness skills. That's why the Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring this event. Those business people want to be able to hire people that can do the jobs that need to be done. So it all makes sense. But they didn't dictate, the feds did not dictate, they did not dictate the Common Core state standards. They just said, we want college and career standards put in place. And so our state, as Cynthia and Jody indicated, along with a consortium of 40 some odd other states, have set forth these standards. So if there is anything that could even come close to strings, I would say it's that, but they're very loose strings, because they didn't define the standards. They said put in place standards relating to college and career readiness.
Thank you, Superintendent Rosendick. Here's a question that cuts to the chase. Where's the proof that these standards are effective for the better?
That's a good question. I don't know about the proof because we're just starting to implement them. What I can tell you is the high level of research on what skills and processes students need to have to be successful in the college and the workplace. And so I think that these were not done willy-nilly. There were such amazing experts that developed these, authors, researchers. So I feel very confident that they're very research-based, and I guess we'll find out when we implement them and make any adjustments as we need to as we go. But I guess I'm very confident that they're built on high levels of research.
By whom?
Okay, so there's 44, 45 states that have gone this route. And it's been explained to us that there's these standards, and then Idaho's signed on to the effort to reach these standards, but we've been given the latitude in how to get there, right? But are we legally tied to these other 44 or 45 states that have adopted these standards? Is there anything that ties us to their movement forward, or is the implementation in this state solely ours?
If I understand, it's solely Idaho's, absolutely Idaho's. So the Common Core were adopted by the State Board of Education. From that, the Smarter Balance Assessment is a consortium of 26 other states now again. So they're drafting the test that we're going to be held accountable to, that Idaho is at that table to build those assessment items. And we have educators at that table too that represent Idaho. So in terms of being linked to any other state, no, I don't believe that we are.
I would agree with that. The only other thing I would mention that I don't think Jody and I have talked about is the option to build in an additional 15%. Each state, you know, if we do, and we did go forward with the adoption, the organizations have said, then if Idaho feels like there's something we feel very strongly about that was left out, then we can go ahead and write those additional standards, but it can't be more than 15% of that total document. And to my knowledge, we have not added anything that I know of. And Diane Roberts is here from the State Department. She's the ELA coordinator, and she's shaking her head no. She doesn't, there's no knowledge of us adding anything. But we do have that option, Scott, so I just wanted to mention that.
We've got a lot of them here. Some of them are fairly similar. I'm trying to see them too. With the accepting of the Common Core comes new teaching materials to be used. So what is the increased cost of adopting a whole new set of curriculum that aligns with these new standards? That's a question about cost, and is that at this time wise? I'm paraphrasing whoever did it, sorry. We all hear how tight our budgets are. And now we're undertaking this sea change in terms of trying to align what we have with these new standards. What is the cost? Is it exponentially greater, or is it going to fall within current funding mechanism?
Well, that's absolutely a great answer, and I heard a question. I don't necessarily know if there's a specific answer in terms of a dollar amount that we could tell you without a doubt. So what I can tell you is,
Mine too.
is part of what's happened, and both Cindy and I have talked about this, is we're looking to see what we currently have and linking that to the new Common Core. Now, what that might be, or what that might mean, is what we currently are teaching in 6th grade now might have to be in 4th grade, which means not only is the standards moving, but all the materials and resources that we took to teach that will move also. So there'll be some shifting of current resources in-house. The other thing is you start to watch commercials and advertisements, you're going to see that everything is aligned to the Common Core, and they're saying this is the next best thing, and it's the best Band-Aid that we can put on, and do this, and it's nothing more than a diet pill, right? You take this and you lose 50 pounds kind of thing. Well, what's happened now is you have to be due diligent. You have to absolutely, knowing that the money that we have needs to go and fiscally responsible, we need to be fiscally responsible with what we've got. And we will do that. But in doing that, we're just not going to go out and purchase new stuff because it has Common Core stamped on it. There's going to be quite a little bit of research behind it. It's also the belief that this is not about a textbook. This is about linking resources to what we currently have in the best approach to deliver the information that we need to deliver at the grade level. So a textbook isn't the answer, not necessarily the answer. And as Cindy whispered in my ear as Scott was talking, is technology. We're now jumping into this new era of not new, I mean, it's been here, but what type of delivery method do we give? Do we give every child a laptop? Do we give everybody a one-to-one? What type of information web-wise do we need to implement within our systems? And so with that, there's additional costs that will come, but again, it's going to be the most effective and the most productive source of what we can with the current funding we have.
Here's a really good question. Will the parents always be able to have access to the curriculum that their children are being taught within this new framework?
I'm going to say yes for Caldwell. I don't know what more.
I would say whenever it's possible that it's available to parents, we're going to get that for you. You know, with our current materials that we have, like everyday math at Valley View, there are those parent components that are available, the parent letters that come home with the students. So I believe that when these textbook companies write these new materials, they're going to include everything they can for parents because they realize that that's a key issue that we as districts are going to be looking at when we go through the process of adopting new materials.
Okay, and here's the last question. I'm going to throw you a big curveball here. So I asked from a parent perspective, how can I help the districts with the implementation of this? I'm going to ask you the opposite question. How can citizens stop Common Core from being implemented?
Superintendent Rosen?
Well, I would say, first of all, I want to preface this like a good politician with not answering the question initially. 61%, research done by Georgetown University says that in the year 2020, 60% of the jobs in Idaho are going to require some sort of certification or a college degree of some kind. Right now, we have about half of that in place right now. About half of what's needed of the citizens in Idaho have the kind of training that they're going to need to have to get a job, a good paying job in Idaho by the year 2020. We've got a big gap. And I truly believe, and I've got 3 kids, they're grown, they're employed, one's still in school, go Vandals, let's hope he gets done. But anyway, I can just tell you honestly that if my kids were going through the system now, I would have greater confidence that they were going to be exposed to very rigorous, challenging courses that would put them in a much better position to be part of that 60% by the year 2020. I'm confident. I'm confident about that. The Common Core state standards have been approved by the State Board of Education. They're the people that approved it. And Cindy talked about the vetting process that went through. So there is a political angle to this, obviously. And in most cases, we have Senator Jim Rice here. He may be able to explain this better than I. But the legislature
That's
also...
called throwing someone under the bus.
The legislature also has a role in setting rules by approving or not approving rules that are set forth by the State Board of Education. So there is a political aspect to this, without a doubt. But I feel, from my experience, that politics have not played an inappropriate role in the setting of these standards. Look, I just truly believe this. Kids that are going to go through systems in the next decade are going to be exposed to much more challenging curriculum. Cindy talked about how the scores are going to dip. Yeah, when this new test comes out, and believe me, the test, and they showed examples of it, it's going to be a bear cat. It's going to really challenge kids in ways they haven't been challenged for the last decade. And when your child does well on that assessment, it doesn't mean everything, but it will give you a sense of confidence or not about what their skill set is. The Common Core state standards and the new assessment isn't making teachers' jobs easier, believe me. It's going to make their jobs more challenging. And I think we're up to it, but we've got to be up to it together. So the part that you talked about in terms of what can parents do to help, yeah, we're going to need their help, big time, not just in understanding them, but also what are the things, and people like you do this anyway, that's why you're here, but what can parents do at home to help support? Parental support is going to be very important, as it has been in the past, but now in a little different direction.
That's fine. So I'll use that as an opportunity. I didn't get to all the questions. Some of them are repeated. I tried to give a fair cross-section of what the questions were. So you guys have committed. Everyone who put their email address will get a response, correct?
Sure.
Okay, of some sort.
But not by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
No, not by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I want to, hopefully you guys have learned a little bit. If nothing else, knowledge is important. Before we get out of here, I want to thank the lovely Tracy Lee Ballmer up there who set this all up for us. She is the overlord of College of Idaho Media, so she runs all this stuff. This is something that I need to know about. I have kids. As an employer, this is something I need to know about because I'm going to be employing your kids, hopefully. We all need to know how these things occur. That's why the Caldwell Chamber thought this was important to provide this. The answers you heard are from two people that are on the ground working diligently to implement these things. Their answers should give you some perspective on what's going on. I would encourage you all, as with all things, to go out and do your own work. Do your own research, learn what it means for you, learn how you can help if you're so inclined. But the important thing is we're all here engaged in this, and that's how good things happen and bad policies, hopefully, and good policies also get implemented or stopped. I want to thank you two, and hopefully I haven't stepped on my own tongue too many times today. I want to thank you guys all for being here. I want to thank the superintendents. Look, these concerns and this type of information needs to be expressed in every community in this state, and I don't think every community in this state is having this kind of opportunity to reach out, and that's a testament to our two superintendents and their boards wanting to engage the public in what is going on in this very important arena. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to Valley View and Caldwell School Districts. Thanks you two, you did a great job. And thanks College of Idaho and